Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again. I am coming here to the stage. Um, Please find yourselves a good seat. There's no more seat on the Sunken Blimp Stage. But welcome back to the Sunken Blimp Stage to another dive live on this beautiful Friday. Today we have a very special guest here with us, and I hope you guys are excited because we're going to be talking about the topic of 3D printing fashion. And it's actually someone really, really special. We've been following her work for a very long time. And just like myself, she is based in architecture. So I will introduce Krizia from So Printed for us today. And for those that don't know, Krizia, she's an architectural designer from Puerto Rico that has decided to experiment through design at all scales. She makes 3D printed wearable and video content about them. Her channel, So Printed, is where her creations are shared with the world, and she has always had an interest in fashion, taking sewing and pattern making lessons when she was younger. But she found that the process of hand patterning and hand sewing tedious and a bit bulky. And when she saw that everything could be 3D printed using computers, CAD softwares, she was hooked, just like a lot of us who are into 3D printing. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Krizia to the stage. And a round of applauses and welcome, Krizia. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the introduction. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm new to the Sunken Blimp Stage, so I'm just getting used to all the techie stuff, and
Yeah, we
it's
can hear you
pretty fun,
fine.
let me tell you. Perfect. Awesome. So, like Taylor said, I'm the face behind So Printed, and I create videos about 3D printed textiles and accessories and clothes. And I do currently work as an architect, but I just love design at all scales. And so I'm gonna start over here in this corner. I hope um, this presentation is sort of flexible and like everyone can follow me along. Yeah, I think it's cool. So my inspiration sort of came from me seeing like this collection of a designer called Dani Peleg. She's an Israeli designer, and so I sort of went down the 3D printing rabbit hole, and so it's 3D printing and fashion at the same time. And I found other amazing designers like Julia Corner and Iris Van Harpen, which make like these very amazing avant-garde pieces. And so I was so fascinated about this, then I just bought myself like a super little Ender 3, which was what all that I could afford at the time. I had a single spool of the TPU filament, which I used very, very cheaply, I guess. I printed like super small samples because I really wanted to like maximize the use of that spool. And then I just pushed the TPU super flexible filament on my Ender 3, which is not optimized to print that material. And I just started doing some crazy experiments and posting them online. And so I to give a brief overview of 3D printing fashion in general, I just want to talk about what I see potential in with like 3D printing in the fashion industry. And so one of the key things is like customization. Having 3D printed items that one could wear has this potential for mass customization, where people can just order from places that are commonly known to create standard sizes and just have custom pieces made for them. And things like digital scans, personal measurements can be sort of parameters plugged into CAD software that can customize clothing patterns, just completely digitally. And this can, lead to also being influenced in like shoes and for accessories. And I just I recently did a review for like these sandals of a company down in Australia that they actually do customize footwear, so it's sort of starting to happen. um, there's also a lot of material variety within the industry, so anything can sort of turn into filament now, right? And there's an availability of a lot of, well, plastic that can be recycled. I've used recycled rubber tire filament, bioplastics, recycled plastic bottles, and this has been done already to create certain fashion pieces and footwear. And I think that's, you know untapped potential in the makerspace, at least. A lot of like big industrial 3D printers are the ones that have that type of material available. Not as much in like the individual maker space, but it is happening. There's some startups that are doing that. Another factor is that printers produce finished pieces, so they use exactly the amount of fabric that or material that you need. Whereas like traditional making garment methods are sort of taking this swatch, mega manufacturing, mega producing this swatch of fabric, and then cutting out things to have a lot of waste from it. So there's waste in the process. There's waste in the way that you're cutting the fabric. It's just sort of, and it uses also a lot of water, which is something that we don't see. And so also in our current physical like world, we're sort of adding this digital component. You know, we sort of have our phones all the time with us. We're right now on a virtual stage, so like this line between digital and physical sort of begins to blur. And the fact that you have CAD as the interface, you can like I could be wearing some clothes right now that I could have in my physical world as well. So my avatar could literally become clothed the same way that I'm clothed. And so there's like a blur between these our two worlds. And lastly, I think 3D printing is such a vessel for creativity. Like there's so many things that you can do. And I say so many because there's a lot of them that I don't even know. So many things that you can do with it, which you can't just do with traditional garment making methods. So I'm going to start talking through some of my projects. And like I mentioned, everything that I've been doing is sort of through experimentation. I really haven't done like most of the things are sort of planned last minute, and they sort of go like at the time that I'm doing an experiment, then it's like, oh, I should do this, and I just jump into it. So that's how it's been going for me in the most part. My first project is this map bag that I started to do when it's the same filament that I was using earlier to do experiments. And I felt that the material, when you printed it sort of in a thick way and with the right infill, it was sort of very much like a faux leather, and it felt like something that you could make a purse out of. And so that's how it came. And with my background in architecture, I've always loved site plans and site maps, and they have like this super cool textural aspect to them. And like in the practice, we don't use them as much because it's mostly uh like a or either like a Google screenshot from bird's eye view, or just a very annotated drawing. I don't know. So the pretty site plans that you get to draw in school are never like graphically taken into another context. And I was like, it would be super cool to make a bag and then just make a pocket on it that's like completely 3D printed and has a map of something. And that's how this project sort of evolved. And it's such, now looking back on it, it's such a simple project. At least it is now looking back on it, but at the time it was so hard to get it to work and get it right, and all the tweaking that it took. And it's just like a lot of how do you say, YouTube college doing. Like I would just look for a bunch of videos about 3D printing that had nothing to do with 3D printed fashion and see how I could apply it to what I was doing. And that's how we are going now to the next portion of this, which is all my experiments of 3D printed fabrics and textiles that you saw on that first slide. This is kind of where they led to. So I would experiment a lot with infill methods and tweaking my infill settings and just tweaking everything that I could in Cura, just to do like the dumbest version of what I could get it to do, before having to alter G code or having to do any parametric alterations. And I was able to get like this super stretchy mesh out of it. And I was really impressed how strong it was, how like fabric like it felt. It's really soft. And so this was definitely one of those projects that I just started experimenting and ended up where I ended up. And I made like this orange holding tote bag because it's had such a has a similarity into like those mesh net totes, but then I made a clutch out of the same technique, and then another tote bag that held books. So like an idea sort of evolved over time, and it was like a process of discovering itself, and it's really fun. And I think uh, that's one of the potentials that the technology has, that you can just do anything and see what happens. It doesn't have to be like a super planned ultra design thing. It's just like, let's see what happens if I do this, and then learn from that and carry on to your next iteration. um let's walk past this bulgy egg and go to the next area. So uh like I was talking about earlier, material wise, I thought that this project was like a material inception. So I found this filament that's made out of recycled plastic from the footwear industry. And I was like, yeah, it needs to become shoes. So I started doing some physical modeling of different, like a shoe iteration, and then made these white sandals, which are like just a practice run with another filament that I feel more comfortable printing. So recycled filaments are typically hard to print, or can be hard to print just because of their nature. If there's any additives in the mixture while the plastic was treated, then maybe that could make it a bit harder to print. But I practiced with the white filament. I was able to get even a sort of finished product, which I've actually worn around, and then went on to the recycled plastic sandals. And I was really inspired by this dress from Iris Van Harpen, which has these, like, I don't know, almost feather-like petals that are I found really beautiful. And I sort of took that language and turned it into the decorative part of the shoe. And I put it all together using a 3D pen. So the 3D pens are usually like used for making something, but I sort of use it as a soldering tool most of the time. Sometimes I use a soldering tool too. And finding out all these things that I'm saying now is like a given. I had no place to sort of find them. It's mostly like talking to people, like people that are in 3D printing have such a great spirit of like helping each other out, and like making videos about anything that they find out that works. So I would say this person on TikTok, her name is Emily the Engineer, that she makes these awesome Iron Man suits, and she would use a soldering tool to sort of unify all her pieces and just like seal them and solder them together. And I was like, okay, what is that? It looks like a pen. And then I would go on Amazon and be like, heat pen, heat stick. I don't know. I would just look for things, and then found out it was actually a soldering iron, like one of those that just cost like $10, and it works like a charm. And after making those shoes, I was like, I need to make clothes. Like I have been playing around with the idea of textiles for too long, and I still have yet to make something that I actually can wear. And I knew that it was sort of possible. I had done some like t-shirt flips that were all well, clothes, but it was just pieces of a whole. It wasn't like an actual garment. So um in true architecture school fashion, if anyone went to design school and you know what it is, at last minute, a week before I had this trip to New York City, I was like, oh, I should print like a capsule wardrobe. Like I've seen people do capsule wardrobes on YouTube, or they do like a thrift flip and then they do that. Let's see if I can make like a 3D printed version of that. And I quickly came up with this jacket idea, which is floating over here. And I also came up with like this houndstooth dress, which is sort of like an overall because it has like the buckles up top. And I drew them up in CAD and spent the whole week like printing and switching filaments. And you can imagine like sometimes getting failed prints in this was like, oh no, I'm not gonna make the deadline. Oh no, I'm not gonna do it. So it was kind of nerve wracking. But I even took some of the pieces of the overall. I hadn't finished it. I took it to New York and just finished it there. And I just wore it around to show like, hey, you can wear stuff like this, or how does it feel? And I'm just really honest about it. Like the jacket, it's not a jacket that keeps you cold. And the overall dress, yes, you can wear it, but it's not like the most comfortable. It's not gonna feel like athletic wear or cotton, but it's like kind of, I think, has value in the idea of like thinking in that way, and then it's like, okay, then what do I need to get it to be comfortable? What needs to change in order to make this jacket, if I were to make a jacket that's actually fitted for a cold? So it it sort of plays on that idea that I had for the tote bags of like, I make something, I see what it becomes, and then sort of go into the next phase of like, how can this be improved, or how can this have an application on something else? And so towards the end of this video, I know it's playing on a loop, I sort of took it upon myself when I came back home. I was like, I never wore like all the 3D printed items together. It was just like either the jacket or the dress. And I took the white sandals that I had from the sandals experiment, a bandana that I had made, which is super simple links that are all 3D printed, and another printout of the map bag. And I just wore all three five items together and created like the ultimate 3D printed outfit, and just walked around in it. And it was a pretty cool experience, let me tell you. And finally, the biggest challenge I've sort of presented myself with to this day, um, was 3D printing my wedding dress. So when Mateus introduced me, he said like, "Oh, Krizia had some classes in fashion and patterning." I did, but I was like 14. That was a long time ago. I don't remember a lot of the things, and I didn't. It was annoying. It was sort of like very much a archaic, because I needed for everything like this ruler that's a specific ruler. I needed this pencil or this stencil. So it was like very bulky and like uphill process to get what you wanted. I've seen that a lot of people now on YouTube and individual makers, they just sort of drape things on a dress form and have a more organic process. But I'm still not sold on it. So I sort of thought of this way of creating the simplest pattern for the dress. And it's sort of a, does this play? Yeah. So it's sort of a simple dress that then has all like that detail and large scale lace. And I did some experiments on what those lace flowers could be. So playing with the different filaments, the different infills, and I ended up using two filaments. So the bottom layers are printed in this transparent filament, and then the outlines that are giving like the contours to the flower are printed in white, so it looks bolder. And then I added some beading to the center of the flowers, and just pretty much used a combination of doing things in CAD for the flowers and doing things by hand. So it's sort of marrying the two techniques together, of 3D printing and traditional garment making methods. And I did finish my wedding dress actually on the day of the wedding. So that's me the day of the wedding in the morning, just tacking on last minute flowers and like leaves with my 3D pen. Some of them became loose later on in the evening because they weren't tagged super properly. But I sort of thought it like added to the whimsical manner of it, that they were sort of like popping out and sort of loosely tacked on. And so I think this was like one of the projects that I feel that I had worked towards. So it was something that I hadn't done before. It was, everything else was sort of experimental, and this was like, okay, now I'm gonna take all of this and just turn it into like one final piece. And it was very fun. I enjoyed it, and it's a very special thing to me. And so with that being said, I've only sort of mentioned all of the perks that the technology has, and of course, I'm a bit biased, but there's some truth in saying that there are some, not downfalls, but there are some areas that need to be sort of worked out in order to for it to be reach the potential that I know it can. And for example, printers right now are sort of not optimized for fashion, both in size and in shape. So some of the industrial 3D printers that are really expensive and are only sort of available to academia or people that have big companies, then those are sort of starting to get into that space of 3D printing on fabric and using multiple colors more easily than desktop 3D printers are. And
we also have like a gap, like I said, in the materials. So although they're starting, there are some startups that are starting to bring more of this recycled or plant-based or even just organic materials into the maker space. They're still like not completely readily available on the market to everyone. Also, these some of these industrial like printers have like available like polyjet technology that use some plant-based filaments, but those are, I guess, a bit inaccessible to some people. And another thing that I think is something that makes it a bit difficult um, to reach its full potential is sort of like the scale that 3D printing fashion is being done. It's mostly individual makers, which is awesome and super like couture of it. Like it's very personalized and very slow fashion is what most 3D printing designers sort of call it. But if we are talking about mass customization and that as a perk, then it's sort of, it still hasn't reached that. And I'm curious to know what would happen. Like maybe it doesn't reach that scale and it does remain as like a couture niche. That would be interesting too. So I don't I personally don't think that 3D printing fashion is going to replace all garment making methods, but I do think it does have a space within the fashion industry. And lastly is the recycling of materials. So this is a great idea that has been tossed up and tossed around like between a lot of companies, I bet, because there are extruders that are sold right now for you to sort of grind up your filament and old prints and turn them into new filament. But I've seen different people on YouTube, like 3D printing nerd and make anything, make videos about this, and the quality of the filament that gets extruded is not like the level of quality of the filaments that we purchase. And I think this may change, it hopefully it does. Um, but it right now I think it's just not there yet. So thank you for coming. And I'm just going to conclude by saying that I do believe that 3D printing has a place in the future of fashion. I think there's a lot of untapped potential, like optimizing 3D printers to print textiles. And I'm just excited to see about like the innovation that still has yet to happen. And yeah, any questions?
Wow, just amazing, amazing. Thank you so much, Krizia. Like the work that you showcased and, your story, how you got to be, to the level that you are, and also, the how progressively more complex different projects we're getting is just amazing to see. I'm gonna open the floor for anyone that has any questions for you. So feel free, anyone, to unmute yourself and ask a question. All right, so since everyone's trying to talk at once, I'm gonna ask one. I am actually curious to know what would be your tip for other architecture students, or not necessarily only architecture students, but other people that are interested in starting something, right? You clearly showed that you had a passion and you had interest in the world of fashion, and then you combined your knowledge of what your career is with something that you're passionate about. So, what would be your tip for someone that also has a dream and is caught within this idea of like starting something, etc.?
That's a good question. And so I think I don't know why, and like this is obviously going to be my opinion or my perception from my experiences, but I think there's this idea of like that you need to find a job that gives you what you want, and you need to find a job that sort of is that dream job. And sort of what you're doing now, Mateo, which I really am impressed by, is like create your own job or create like be entrepreneurial, and if it's something that you believe in and want to go for, just go for it. So a lot of research that I've seen in 3D printing fashion has happened in academia. Like people that are doing PhDs with a topic, and I was like, oh, I don't know how to get in that, and I'm also on this route to working in architecture, so I probably don't want to go back to school for that. So
What can I do just to experiment on my own and to do projects that I like? And it's sort of just starting to do things on your own. And like, so printed wasn't anything at some point. It sort of became what it is now because I just started doing things. And it's sort of a thing that you don't need to find a vessel to do what you want to do. You can just start to do it and create your path. And I am a very strong believer in entrepreneurship in that way. So it's whether it becomes your side hustle or later on it becomes your main hustle, I don't know, but I think there's value in figuring things out on your own too. And to follow up on that too, I think there's a lot of value now in sharing stories. So and I think that bridges the gap between people that know about your topic and don't. So none of my closest friends were overly interested in 3D printing. I was sort of the only freak. And a lot of them didn't study architecture. So it sort of became a way of me sort of making videos and making taking pictures and writing about things in a way that it expands the potential of the technology to people that don't know anything about it or don't know what a 3D printer is yet. Like even my parents. So like at first I would tell them I spent this amount of money on this thing that does this, and it's like what does that do? Is it like a do you need like a toner for that? And I'm like, mom, no, it's not a toner, it's not a printer like for paper. It was hard to sort of and it sort of helped to have people say things like that because it was like okay, then if I do want to reach an audience that I want to show what the potential of this is, then I do have to explain the whole story and tell the whole story and why is this valuable. And it's been an exercise still. Like I still if I see like an old video, which I try not to, but if I see an old video of mine, I can tell like okay, I'm glad I'm doing this better. Like this was definitely something I could improve on. And storytelling I feel like is very important, especially now since most of the most of the things that are new and innovative exist within academia.
Crazy.
And I love academia and I love it's college, school, and everything that has to do with education, but there's also value in individual makers, and they have a big voice and a large audience to reach. Mhm.
Yeah, what program did you design your flowers in?
So I drew them up in Illustrator, and then I brought them into Rhino to give them their 3D-ness. But a lot of people don't have access to Rhino. I know Blender is probably better. I'm looking to learn Blender soon, hopefully. Thanks to everyone. This was fun.